Hey everybody, it's Chris here at the Whistle Stop Cafe in Mirror, Alberta. Sorry I am exactly 43 minutes late. Today's been a pretty big day. It's been pretty hectic and we've been getting calls and messages from all over the world. Calls from the United States, Ontario, messages and emails from Ireland and Australia. Everybody wants to talk about what's going on. Everybody wants to know what's happening and where we're headed. So without any further delay, I will let you know right now. So what we have done is we have filed a claim against Her Majesty the Queen and right of the province of Alberta, the Chief Medical Officer of Health and Alberta Health Services regarding the COVID-19 response and restrictions that we've seen over the last year and a half. So before I get into what this claim is all about, I'm going to let you all know that there is a lot of weird procedural legal wrangling that's going to happen before we get into the meat and potatoes of this, or it even sees trial. What's happened is there's so many claims right now and there's so much stuff going on in the courts that what's happened is they're case managing everything. So all the similar claims are being kind of heard together. There's some big claims going on right now. The one that comes to mind is the Ingram case. That's the lady that owns the gym who is also suing the government. And what's going on with that is basically the courts have said we're going to hear her case and we're going to use that as kind of the standard on how we deal with the rest of them. And that's fair. We don't want to overwhelm the court system. But it is quite apparent that this is a very big deal given that the courts have had to take these steps to manage the cases effectively. So, you guys are going to see copies of this this filing probably on Rebel News. As you know, they are funding my legal fight through fightthefines.ca. If it wasn't for that, there's no way I'd be able to do this. Like I said before, when you fight the government, it takes years and hundreds of thousands of dollars. And a guy like me, I just don't have that kind of cash. Hardly anybody does, and that's why things often don't change, is because the government expects the little guy to back down because the task is almost insurmountable if you're doing it on your own. But apparently I'm not on my own. There's thousands and thousands of people all across Canada that have been donating at fightthefines.ca, and those donations are helping people like me and other plaintiffs and defendants against the government restrictions due to COVID. So I read this filing today, talked to my lawyer a little bit, and it's pretty awesome. So what we're doing is we're basically saying that the Public Health Act and the legislation behind it has allowed an unlawful infringement on our rights and freedoms. In particular, our right to peaceful assembly, our right to protest. Those are the biggest ones, and our right to. Did I say peaceful assembly? I did. Yes, I did. So those are the biggies, especially the right to protest. If we're dealing with a government that isn't listening to the people, that the people believe is enacting bad policy in bad faith and not representing its citizens, that is one of the staples of democracy, is the right to protest. If we can't get together and voice our displeasure, distaste, or our outright outrage at what the government's doing, what can we do? We sit at home silenced? It's absolutely ridiculous. If the government's making bad rules, we have the right to protest. And the Public Health Act should not infringe on that. And so if you guys want to take the time, head over to Rebel News. I'm sure there's going to be something up there soon. I'll post something to my page as well, but I'm sure they're going to have it up before me. You can read the whole thing for yourself. And if you have questions, send messages, send emails, share it with your friends, talk about it. What we're doing with this challenge is basically the first step in fixing what's wrong with the system right now. And I've said it before, I'll say it again. What's wrong with the system is we have legislation in place that allows things like this to happen. It allows the Chief Medical Officer of Health to infringe on your rights and your freedoms without proper justification, without going through court, with the stroke of a pen, and with no accountability. But I tell you, we are going to hold these people accountable for what they've done. You can't take away our rights as Canadians and just get away with it and say, oh, well, it's, we thought we were doing the best. I'm sorry, but if you're in that position, you need to do better than just think you're doing the best. You need to know that you're doing what has to be done for the people. And what's happened over the last year and a half, it wasn't necessary. It was discriminatory. It was absolute garbage. And you can see the backpedaling within the government from time to time. They know it. Do you guys remember when Deena Hinshaw said, okay, well, we're going to write some rules so that you guys can protest? She didn't do that out of the kindness of her heart. She did that because she knew, the government knew, that her order was infringing on a right that was not supposed to be infringed on. Public health emergency or not. You cannot infringe on those rights, and they knew it. So they put out something that says, oh, you can do it, but you just have to do this. Too little, too late. It's going to be the same with religious assembly. Too little, too late. And now, I want you guys and gals to pay attention to the wording the government's using. They're basically putting Deena Hinshaw out on her own. They're saying stuff like, we are accepting what the Chief Medical Officer of Health is recommending, and we're not going to make amendments. They're telling us that she is doing this, and they're just going along with it, but it's not their responsibility. So don't get mad at them if something goes wrong. Deena Hinshaw is in a bad place right now. I certainly wouldn't want to be in that place. So I'm going to go through a couple parts of this filing. I should have highlighted it, but I didn't, so I'm going to have to kind of blabber on while I'm looking for it. Here we go. So I'll just read this out for you. Provisions of the CMOH orders which, either collectively or separately, infringed on the rights of the applicant were those which limited capacity, restricted access, and forced the closure of his restaurant, business, and meeting place. Prohibited gatherings at private residences. Prohibited gatherings at his place of business. Prohibited social gatherings. Prohibited protests. Prohibited gatherings for political purposes. And arbitrary and discriminatory application of the law, which includes, but is not limited to, CMOH order and restrictions under the Public Health Act against small business owners, including the applicant. Now, something I want to point out here. This filing is not just for me. This filing includes something called a declaration for public interest. And that means that we're not only fighting for me and my business and my family, but we're fighting for you. Every other person in Alberta that was affected by these restrictions, maybe they don't even know they were, but everybody was. This filing is for you as well. Now, part of the reason why we're going to push this so hard is because the places that we gather, especially little cafes, coffee shops, restaurants, since they've existed, they have always been a hub of a community. They've always been a place where people came together to discuss current events, to discuss politics, to often to protest things that they don't like that the government is doing. These places, these little restaurants, even like, your little coffee cafe on the corner in Red Deer, these places are important. That's where people gather. And when you limit people from gathering, or when you completely isolate them, you're pretty much you're socially what's a good word? You're hindering people's social interactions, which is the basis of any kind of conversation or debate about what's going on in the world. You keep everybody locked in their homes and they can't talk to each other. Well, maybe everyone's going to sit at home and say, "Oh, well, this sucks and it's not right, but we're just going to do it because we think everybody else is." But if you can gather and talk to each other about what's going on, you quickly realize that you're not the only person that thinks this way. So this is very important. Another part in this that I was very happy to see, it states, on or about May 2021, as far as is known to the applicant, the Government of Alberta directed officials to target and aggressively enforce CMOH orders against high-profile dissidents of COVID-19 lockdown rules, including the applicant. The Government of Alberta, by giving such directions, directly involved itself and interfered with the administration of justice. So we basically had the government saying to AHS, you need to get this guy, or you need to get that girl. You need to get them. You need to force them into submission. Since when is it the government's job to direct enforcement or inspection people to go and target business owners? Everybody should be treated the same under the law, but we weren't. You saw that time and time again. There were certain businesses that maybe they got a slap on the wrist. There were certain businesses that never got bothered at all. There were certain businesses that weren't even subject to the restrictions. For instance, airports. You could go and dine in an airport anytime during these COVID restrictions. Even when my cafe and the rest of Alberta was shut down, you could go and dine in at other places, and they weren't subject to the same rules. The rules weren't applied evenly across everybody in Alberta. Another part of this, enforcement of the CMOH orders has arbitrarily been more aggressive against political dissidents and those who stand in political opposition than against those not expressing dissent or public opposition to public policy set by the Government of Alberta, and investigated and enforced by Alberta Health Services and other agencies. So what this is saying is, we are alleging that the Alberta government used Alberta Health Services as a way to force those who didn't agree with them or were in opposition to them to submit to their tyrannical overreach. And that is absolute garbage. This is a government that we elect that's supposed to be working for us. There was times where I offered to speak with Alberta Health Services. I offered to speak with the Premier, with Minister Shandro, anybody. I offered to speak with them so that we could get this under control without getting to the point where we're throwing people in jail. They all refused. Instead, they basically sicked their guard dogs on me. That's not the way the government should work. If the people want an open discussion with the government and they want to try and get something done without causing trouble, so to speak, the government should be listening. These are our representatives. They work for us. They enact laws on our behalf. They're not supposed to be using quasi-government agencies to try and squash their opposition. That's some serious China stuff right there. Like, you speak out against the government and they're going to take away your business. You speak out against the government, they're going to throw you in jail. They may not throw you in jail for speaking out against the government, but they're going to find something else to throw you in jail for, like serving hamburgers. I went to jail because I wouldn't stop serving hamburgers to people opposing the government's rules. Oh, here's what I was getting at before. Freedom of association. Freedom of association is intended to recognize the profoundly social nature of human endeavors and to protect the individual from state-enforced isolation in the pursuit of their ends. It protects the collective action of individuals in pursuit of their common goals. That's everybody, not just me, that's you and everybody. It functions to protect individuals against more powerful entities, thus empowering vulnerable groups and helping them work to right imbalances in society. It allows the achievement of individual potential through interpersonal relationships and collective actions. To sum that up, we're stronger together. And we've been saying that from the beginning. We're stronger together. And when we're isolated, when we're prevented from getting together and speaking to each other, We're weak. We're like little pieces of grass blowing in the wind, and we can't make any difference. But when we do something together as a group, there's nothing that can stop us, even a tyrannical government. So I'm going to read another section here. It's even tough for me to understand. I had to read it a few times, so I'll do my best. The orders of the CMOH made under Section 29 of the Public Health Act contravene Section 2 of the Alberta Bill of Rights. The paramount clause of the Public Health Act, Section 75, expressly reiterates the supremacy of the Alberta Bill of Rights. To the degree the CMOH orders violate the rights protected by Sections 1D and 1E of the Alberta Bill of Rights, the CMOH orders are unlawful and of no force or effect. Pursuant to Section 2 of the Alberta Bill of Rights, Section 29 of the Public Health Act must be construed and applied so as not to authorize the abrogation or infringement of the rights protected by Section 1 of the Alberta Bill of Rights. All infringements of enumerated rights protected under Section 1 are prohibited unless the government has passed legislation declaring that the infringement may occur notwithstanding the Alberta Bill of Rights. The CMOH orders, as applied, restricting public or private gatherings of people, especially public protests and or gathering for political purpose, are ultra vires, I don't know what that means, 29 of the Public Health Act. So what this is saying is that the Public Health Act itself states that anything in that act has to be consistent with the Alberta Bill of Rights. And that's fair. What's the point of having a Bill of Rights if we have legislation that tramples and stomps all over it? But the CMOH orders did not. The CMOH orders violated the Alberta Bill of Rights. We said this from the beginning, and now it's documented and is filed with the court. So I'm pretty excited about this. It brings a little ray of light in an otherwise gloomy outlook on court. And I say gloomy because I don't really feel like sitting and being cross-examined by AHS's lawyers in a couple days. But I'll try and have fun with that. My sanction hearings, that's going to be weird, having a judge decide whether I go to jail or pay fines or whatever for standing up against what I just talked about right there, something that violated our rights. The Public Health Act says that the Public Health Act and whatever they do within it can't violate our, it has to be consistent with the Bill of Rights, and they didn't do it. We tried to tell them in the beginning, we were yelling from the rooftops that you can't do this because we have guarantees under the Canadian Bill of Rights and the Alberta Bill of Rights. Crickets from the government. No help at all. Just go get that guy because he's in opposition to us. Well, now it's before the courts. So it goes on to talk about how the orders unjustifiably limited or infringed upon my charter rights, which they did. That's a really long one. There's like 4 or 5 pages on that. Again, what I was saying before. Meeting, assembling, gathering, and acting in the expression of political will is a precept and cornerstone of democracy in Alberta and Canada. These rights are fundamental to all citizens and residents of Alberta and Canada. As such, and for other reasons, the applicant has a public interest standing. A public interest standing means that what I'm fighting for here applies to everybody in Alberta. Not in a negative way. What this is saying is that I'm not the only person who was affected. This filing makes clear that this isn't just about me. This is about everybody. So it's a pretty big deal. And I want to make another thing clear here. What this is here has nothing to do with my charges. If you notice, I'll show you here. This is the first one of these that I've seen where I'm the applicant. I'm not the respondent anymore. This isn't about something I've done that the government is trying to get me for. This is me saying that the government has wronged me and every other Albertan, and we want them to be held to account. You see the respondents? Pretty big news and a pretty good day for me. So then the filing goes on to talk about consolidating this matter with some other stuff that I have in court, in particular the injunction. We're still fighting that. It's a constant fight, and it shouldn't have to be this way. I should not have to, and you should not have to, spend this kind of time and this kind of money to fight the government when you don't agree. It should be the government proving to us that what they've done is justified. And as it stands right now, they don't have to. It's almost like you're guilty until proven innocent. So I don't think that the justice system that we envisioned for this country was ever supposed to work that way. I think it was supposed to be a balance to protect the citizens and make sure that we always had representation and a clear venue to voice our concerns and deal with governmental issues. How anybody can be okay with us having to go up against a juggernaut like the government on our own dime, or fundraise or crowd fund to pay for it and take years of our lives when the government has infinite resources because they take the money right out of our pocket without asking, that's garbage. So anyway, I hope I've been fairly clear about what's happening and what we're going to be doing in court. And again, if you have any questions, please feel free to message me. I know there's some people watching on here and reporting back to some groups that don't agree with me. If you're in one of those groups that don't agree with me and you have a question, a valid question, not do I want these nuts or something stupid like that. If you have a valid question, message me. Get a hold of me. Phone me. I want to say phone me at the cafe, but my staff will kill me because when the phone rings off the hook and they're running off their feet, that sucks. So, yeah, one way or another, get a hold of me and I'll do my best to answer your questions. And maybe if there's enough interest and enough questions and stuff like comments and stuff like that, I'll try and get them together and maybe do another live tomorrow and be a little bit better prepared. So anyway, thank you all again for watching, and wish us luck.